upswing in Liberty. The Leopards under a new head coach. What kind of things do you expect from the Leopards this year and another young team that should be on the upswing?
Yeah, I mean, the Leopards, like you said, they're another team that we're expecting to be pretty interesting this year. Players that they lost last year was Carter Coleman. But, I mean, there's players to watch in Antoine Brown, C.J. Myers, Landon Charles, LeBraylon Wilson, excuse me. But these are some very good, young, talented players. Looking at their offense this year, Liberty is a team that they average 15 points a game. So just over 2 touchdowns last season. An offense that you want to get a little bit more. They got Chris Cunningham coming back, like we said, on running back. Derek DeMatta is going to be quarterback. Deandre Venters is also going to be competing for quarterback as well. Dante Venters is just a phenomenal athlete for them. It's a team, though, that was a huge rushing team last year. A huge team that was a ground and pound team, and you expect the same thing with Chris Cunningham coming back this year. They're going to be utilizing him a lot, trying to just get a little bit more offensive points on the board. I mean, like we said, averaging 15, you want to try to get that number more into the range of like the 20s, 21s. You want to try to get maybe and convert a field goal into a touchdown and get those averages up. But I think if you bump that average up a little bit, average scoring points per game for Liberty, they're going to be sitting real pretty as far as the wins-loss record at the end of the season.
Yeah, when you talk about Liberty and you talk about the new coach, Joe Simon, and some of the things that he'll bring to this team, I think his culture and his ability to, I mean, you follow Liberty football on Twitter. Football. My mind is a Thursday. You follow Liberty football on Twitter, you know that their social media presence is big, and I've said it before. I think with a young team, especially when you're trying to instill culture, if you can get a social media presence up and you're tweeting out when kids are doing really well, you're tweeting out videos from the weight room, you're making cool graphics for their schedule, they buy into that a little bit. They really get going when they can really interact and engage with their program on a platform that they're really familiar with in social media. So I think he's bringing a new energy to this young team, and they're returning so much. I think Liberty really exciting this year.
Especially, too, with Derek DeMatta playing quarterback, too. He split a lot of time last year, so didn't get a lot of starts. It looks like from the time being, it looks like they're putting him into that starter role this year, so he's going to have chains loose. It's not splitting snaps anymore. It looks like he's going to have a lot more snaps this year. I don't know if he's going to get all the snaps, but it looks like he's going to be in a lot more of a starting role. I don't know if they've gotten a solid thing on that yet, but whether it's quarterback or whether it's in the offense, you expect DeMatta to be involved somewhat in a starting role. As I think Deandre Venters is the other one, like I talked about too, a quarterback that is going to be competing there. The senior older quarterback in Venters, and then the junior DeMatta are going to be competing. But I expect both of them to be incorporated in the offense for a lot more snaps this year, and I don't think there's going to be as many split snaps for DeMatta. He's going to get a lot more snaps this year.
And that's a misnomer because we say they're not returning starters per se, but they're returning in game experience, and that can be so important. And that can be kind of misleading when someone's looking at Liberty's breakdown and saying, oh, they're not returning a lot of starters, but they're returning a lot of people with game experience, and that's almost just as important when you're talking about a young team. Coach Seidel chiming in and echoing how important social media is into building a program. He runs some great social media for his guys as well. Great graphics, by the way, and I don't know where he got them. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think he got them by Graphics by Quinn a little bit, maybe. I don't want to spoil anything. Maybe Graphics by Quinn, and it looked oddly familiar. But,
yeah, a little bit.
But when you talk about Liberty's defense, talk about who they're returning and some of the things to look forward to the Leopards' defense.
Well, it looks like as far as defense is concerned, what we want to see is Liberty allowed 31.5 points per game. Allowing all those points and saying that the one highlight about Liberty's defense last year was the takeaways. 4 interceptions, 8 fumble recoveries last year. They're a team that was creating turnovers very effectively for the Leopards last year. It was just converting those turnovers into points and then allowing the other team to score on the other side of it. But as far as Liberty is concerned this year, they have the pieces, I think, to create those turnovers again. The defensive line looks to be really good this year. They're returning a lot of them. Zach James, LeBraylon Wilson, Tremendous Watson, all on the defensive line. Deandre Venters is also a linebacker, senior linebacker for them. But 3 defensive linemen coming back from last year, all seniors, all bigger set dudes. Part of the reason why they had 8 fumble recoveries in 2020 as well.
One of the things I love about their defense, they forced a lot of turnovers last year. Like, go get the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, too, it was a team that allowed a lot of points last year, but they were slugfest, too. And they probably could have been in a lot more games had they converted those turnovers into points. And I think that's the biggest thing, is converting turnovers into points into this season, and just creating defense into offense. And I mean, the defense got them in position and gave them opportunities to have extra possessions and scoring. It was just a younger offense that was trying to learn the ropes, learn the scheme. I think you're going to see a lot more efficiency from that offense. And I don't think you're going to see them pass up as many opportunities if they get these takeaways this year.
That's one of the things. I mean, they might not have been. They might have been allowing more points than they would want, but they were just playmakers on that defense that would just make plays. I mean, sometimes defenses aren't exactly great when it comes to yards given up or statistics. But you look at some defenses, they just have playmakers. They just have people that are able to just go out there, find the ball, make some plays for you. So you're not tightening all the screws, at least. I mean, you have people that are able to go out and make the big plays. Now you just have to kind of tighten it up a little bit and give up less points, less yards.
Especially, too, and I mean, with a team that had such a good defensive line last year that was still very experienced, all juniors, in the backfield secondary, very, very young last year. And I mean, we see the teams around, your Brookfields, your LeBrays, your Crestviews of the world, all teams that love throwing the football, especially your LeBrays and your Crestviews that will throw the ball a lot too, that they did last year. And we saw Liberty kind of had to go all or nothing on that, and they did. They went either turnover or touchdown, it seemed like, with their defensive plays. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But I expect that secondary too, having that year of experience now under the belt, seeing a lot of these really good passing offenses that are in their division, I expect them to maybe not miss that coverage as much anymore and stay more man-to-man and make those tackles in the open field a lot more this year.
Can we also just say the turf at Liberty is just phenomenal? And watching one of them, like, there are a lot of turf fields that look great on YSN when we got to do video last year. But turning on a Liberty game, maybe it was the angle the press box was on. Maybe it was the color. I don't know. But I loved watching the broadcast from Liberty because that turf just looks immaculate. And once again, I mean, South Range grad, I like the colors.
Yeah, the color scheme, of course, you're going to like that, too. the big old leopard paw in the middle, I'm sure, too. But no, yeah, it is a beautiful field, too. And it's beautiful to see a lot of these schools turning to that turf field, too. So you don't have to worry about so much about the weather being a factor as far as the grass fields were concerned. We're seeing baseball fields turn to turf now, too. Interesting, too. Some people like it. Some people hate it. There is definitely pros and cons to having both, for sure. But it is definitely beautiful turf field, and that's one thing I'll say about the turf fields is they're a lot easier to maintain and they're a lot easier to make look very nice. But I mean, Liberty, no slouch in making sure that turf field was put up the right way, because it looks beautiful over there.
Now, when you talk about Liberty's schedule and some of the teams that they'll be welcoming into that nice turf field, what are some of the games that we circle to kind of say these are the games that are going to mean a lot for Liberty going forward?
Looking at Liberty's schedule, they open up the season home versus Western Reserve on August 20th. On August 27th, home versus Girard. September 3rd at Lakeview. 10th at Brookfield. 17th at Crestview. 24th at Campbell Memorial. October 1st, home versus Champion. 8th at Newton Falls. 15th, home versus LeBray. And 22nd, home versus Garrettsville Garfield. We know that the gray tier division is no slouch. Every team's going to have to play the same 7 teams in the gray tier. And it's very much like the NE8. The first 3 games are going to be their non-conference games before they start in the conference. Looking at the non-conference first, in Western Reserve, Girard, and Lakeview, favorable schedule, I'd say, though, in those first 3 non-conference games, I'd say, for Liberty.
Yeah, and in Girard and Lakeview, those are both up division schools. So when we talk about computer points, you get those wins, you're going to get the bonus for going up a division.
And I mean, those are two teams too, Lakeview and Girard, where we expect to be right around the same thing with Liberty, making that next step. So they're going to be competitive games, but definitely winnable games for the Leopards. They can come out of this looking 2-3 or even 3-0.
I'm excited for that opener though, bringing in Western Reserve, and we talked about them when we were talking about Brookfield, because Brookfield plays them as well. So when we were talking about Brookfield, then Western Reserve's a team that is going to be really interesting to see open the season in Liberty. And Western Reserve loves to run the ball. Remember last year's Springfield game where Western Reserve held the ball for like 18 minutes in that first half? They couldn't score with it, but they still possessed the ball. So they're going to come into Liberty, try to do the same thing. That's going to be an interesting week 1 matchup. A lot of interesting week 1 matchups. I can't wait for August 20th.
It's going to be an interesting week 1 matchup, especially. So you talked about how Western Reserve loves to run the ball. And I mean, like I said, too, all those defensive linemen that are returning for Liberty, running up the middle is not going to be easy for Western Reserve. So you might see a lot more outside runs, and it's going to come down to more linebackers in the secondary than for Liberty, but definitely going to be an interesting game.
Can you imagine? I think Altier comes into the huddle for Western Reserve. He goes, "All right, guys, we're gonna run up the middle." And the running back's just like, "Up the middle? You can't run up the middle. That's up the
middle." You got 3 bona fide leopards that are sitting up the middle, ready to attack you as soon as you try to run up the. I mean, geez, oh man, the Liberty's defense too, and I mean, you got to be excited for that, having 3 great, just fantastic defensive linemen up front that are going to be intimidating to quarterbacks and running backs that are going to try to run on them.
Yeah. So Altier, the running back, he's going to be like, "Hey, what do you mean I'm running up the middle against Liberty? Let's get me outside. Try to use my speed a little bit. I don't want to run up the middle against those evergreen trees in the Liberty's defensive line."
I will say the MVAC not shy of battles in the trenches this year, as they never usually are. But I mean, this year too, there's going to be a lot of battles throughout the trenches in a lot of games. I mean, offensive lines and defensive lines, it seems like all over the MVAC are just powerhouses.
When I talk about conference games that are going to be fun to watch for Liberty and ones that are going to be very interesting, I got to say, I mean, we already talked about them going up against Camel. I think Liberty versus Champion is going to be a really fun game to watch.
I think it will too. I think with Champion being a very, very solid team last year and looking to be pretty solid this year as well, I think Liberty is going to be a team that it's going to be a game where too October 1st, towards the end of the season, Liberty might be right around that 500 mark, maybe a game under, maybe a game over, or somewhat like that, right around that. And that could be a game that really boosts you and gets you that playoff spot or gets you in a great position to make the playoffs if you come away victorious at Champion.
Yeah, and Champion, another team with a new head coach, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on the program. We'll dive into the flashes. But that'll be 2 teams going up against each other with a new era of coaching staffs. And who's going to be putting their best foot forward. I think that's going to make that game really interesting.